through today, we're going to talk about three parts. We're going to talk about strengthening your recruitment and retention. We're going to talk about supporting upskilling and reskilling. And we're going to talk about building collaborative spaces. Then afterwards, we're going to talk about integration, and we'll look at the resources that you can use to move forward. Because I don't want to leave you with all of this, what you should do. I want to make sure you have the tools to do that as well, which you'll have access to afterwards. So let's jump right in. The first section we're going to talk about is strengthening your recruitment, really tied to your individual workplace. It's also tied to your larger community. A lot of times when we talk about recruitment and retention, we forget that this is a community effort. We need to work together. Individuals have networks that they need to survive. They need schools to go to, places to eat, community involvement, and they also need the place to thrive in their workspace. So this is not just about creating a space where someone wants to come work. It's also about advocating for a community that helps each person grow. So in this section, we're going to talk about leadership behaviors that influence recruitment credibility and employee retention. So some of the terms that you might hear me use are recruitment credibility, which is really the value of your recruitment process and whether people trust and believe it. We're going to talk about what drives retention. We're going to talk about the impact you have as a leader, institutional knowledge, what knowledge your location keeps, and how you recruit people and retain people from that, how you engage people, career stage expectations, and also how you align your values with your people. It's going to be an action-packed little first part, and it is quite dense. So be sure to be thinking about your space in reflection, because these are going to be a lot of new information, new changes, new tidbits. And what I would encourage you to do is think about drive that momentum forward. Quite simply, the recruitment process to the onboarding process and the exit process is linear. This is how a typical life cycle of an employee looks. You recruit them, you onboard them, and then they exist until they exit for whatever reason. This is the cycle that we look at when we consider most processes. And I want you to expand that process to the broader experience that people have. First, we talk about recruitment. We're going to talk about the messaging that you have during your recruitment process and how that aligns with experience. We're going to look at human-focused recruitment and recruitment for continuity. When you really highlight the power of the recruitment process, it allows you to create a space that's sustainable onward. Most often, our retention falls flat because of a poor recruitment process. Our recruitment falls flat because of a poor recruitment process. So you could have a very large pool of qualified candidates. You select from them after you attract them, but then they leave because whatever reason, your recruitment doesn't align with the experience. Then we're going to talk about onboarding. Once you've onboarded someone, you have to maintain that momentum. It's almost like the honeymoon phase. Onboarding is that honeymoon phase. They want just as much as you want. But then after that dies off, you may lack valuing the person. You may lack that focused engagement, and you may lack that authentic leadership that keeps people there. Those are those monthly dates or those things to say, I'm thinking about you just because. And that relationship is so critical, because otherwise the relationship becomes kind of just two people existing, and you don't have that buy-in and that investment. And when you don't have buy-in and investment, people leave, relationships break apart. And that exit is where you start to see that poor retention or higher attrition, because people aren't valued, they aren't engaged, and they don't have people who are being leaders in an authentic way. The last part there, seeking understanding, is another gap that organizations often don't really focus on, because we think, oh, the person's gone. Why would I continue to invest money and invest time in someone that's not here anymore? Well, because those go back into your recruitment and your onboarding phases. Because when you understand why people came versus what they experienced and why they left, you can change your recruitment process. You can change that onboarding process, and you can change their experience in the workplace to reduce that risk later. So often people leave spaces because they don't see career progression. They aren't valued. They feel like they don't matter. And so looking at how that is integrated prior to leaving can get that buy-in. I had an opportunity to audit a municipal organization recently. And in the audit of that organization, I asked people about their experiences, what they currently experience, how they feel, and everything like that. So many of those people had told me, there was more than 5 people within this organization that said they currently have a letter of resignation written, even though they're still in the job. And then I asked them about the things that they felt they didn't have. And it was the engagement, being valued, seeing career opportunities, knowing that even though they can't progress, maybe they're at the top of their career path, that they still needed to be valued and be supported in the workplace to make sure they stay. So there's a lot of pieces that we can learn, not just from people that currently work in our spaces, but people that are potentially leaving our spaces that we don't know, or after they leave, so we can improve and be better. Starting in that first column, talking about recruitment, it's really that reality versus myth conversation. If you've seen about versus reality, this is the situation for recruitment. Recruitment messages create expectation for people. It tells them what the leadership will do in the workplace. It tells them what they already do, what they're going to support them to do, how they're going to help them be better. It teaches about culture. It teaches about what opportunities there are for growth, because you're selling yourself in recruitment messaging. You're selling what this person's life is going to be like. If we spend a third of our life in the workplace, people need to know why they should buy into your space. What are they going to get back more than just pay, more than a gym membership, more than 50% off on insurance? They need to know how they're going to be supported, how they're going to be valued, how people are going to show up for them, how they can continue to grow in that space, and what that pathway looks like. So as simple as right now, we've seen a big shift in the way that people promote jobs. They say, oh, we are an inclusive workplace. We accept people of all demographics. If you need support in the interview, whatever it may be, there's clear messaging that sells inclusive workplaces. And then people get there and that inclusive workplace isn't there. People always ask in an interview, do you have any questions? But then sometimes those questions, that space for question isn't built on trust, or people fear asking those questions. It starts from the very beginning, how we create that messaging for expectation. So I want to give you a quick example. The myth is that recruitment is just an HR function, and that's not the reality. The reality is that leadership behaviors validate or contradict what's promised. So when we do recruitment, as a person in HR, as someone who's doing the hiring or doing the marketing for these positions, it's so critical to understand what that job life experience is like, because you're selling that frontline experience. You're selling the people that they work with. You're selling your organization as a whole. And if you don't understand that, then you're creating false messaging that people are going to come into and they're not going to see. The cost of attrition is somewhere between a quarter and a third of someone's annual salary. And so when people are leaving, you're reinvesting $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 in not just have clear messaging from the beginning, or invest in your culture and your people so that when they come in, they have the experience that is real to what they've been promised. I want to talk about 2 big definitions here. And you're going to have the decks, which is why I put heavy definitions in the slide deck, because I want you to be able to access this information later. When we talk about human-focused recruitment, it's about making sure we are looking at attracting people based on their experience, but we're also prioritizing fairness and belonging. We want to make sure that we're bringing people that are sustainable into our spaces. Some of those practices are those inclusive, bias-aware job descriptions. I really enjoy, I believe it's the I don't know if it's Indeed or it's one of the recruitment platforms commercials on TV where it's got Gwen Stefani and they talk about being rock stars in the workplace, and the rock stars are in the boardroom and they say, you wouldn't want us here. It's about looking at those descriptions between objective expectations and subjective expectations. Because when we start to have subjective expectations, we remove people from that process that can grow in our spaces. You also have to look at prioritizing skills and potential and transferable experience. I'm going to talk about this a bit more at the end of this section, but having a skills matrix for your workplace, not a lot of people do it. It's so incredibly critical because it allows you to see what skills people have, what you can bring in, and where they can go. And I'm going to show you examples of skills matrices coming up, so I'll be able to go more in depth with that. Ensuring transparent and respectful candidate communication, but also now, as of January, we have legal expectations for that communication process. The transparency of pay is expected. And also, you have to follow up with people who have been interviewed within a certain amount of time. Transparent and respectful candidate communication not only supports your recruitment process, but it supports the reputation of your organization, pulling other people in. Even if they don't get the job, it was still a good experience. It also ties to your design of accessible and equitable interview processes and reflecting your organizational values and culture authentically. Do you know what those are? How are they being integrated into your recruitment process? When you do this, it builds that experience, it increases your talent pool, and it builds that brand for your organization. The second definition there is recruiting for continuity, building that stable, future-ready workforce. And this is really tied to that labor shortage that we're talking about. It's tied to upskilling and reskilling and making sure that your organization is going to be successful long-term as our spaces change. Developing that proactive talent pipeline. So you're bringing people in for a job, but you also have to look at where they can go. That's succession planning. Do you know what the succession plan looks like for your organization? How people need to be developed, or what's and align with your workforce planning. That's that matrix I've been talking about. Strengthening that onboarding and early stage support, making sure people really get that buy-in, show that you're invested in them. Track your retention and early turnover trends, and partner with your community, because this is a network approach. You have to work together to keep people in your space and in your community. When you do this, you're looking at reducing your vacancy gaps, stronger retention, internal mobility, which is that succession planning, and you're improving your organizational resilience. So back to that process, that recruitment, onboard, and exit process. Recruitment, we're looking at what we say, the values, the growth opportunities, mentorship, whatever it is that you're selling people. The risk is that when you oversell your business, you risk people leaving. Because there's a labor shortage and this business may be short-staffed, you're starting to sell things that you can't uphold, and people learn very quickly because they're not looking at what you sold them. They're looking at that behavior in real time. So you need to intervene in that onboarding and in that work experience. And you do that because their leadership and team behavior is what validates or discredits what you sold them. So you can recruit people, but they won't stay. And why would you recruit people? Why would you put money into recruiting people if they don't stay? A lot of times right now, when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion work, people invest in bringing new people on. They invest in diversifying. They invest in hiring. But what about the culture that you currently have? How do you invest in building the space that people exist in before you start bringing new people in? We need to talk about the way that you have leadership interactions that shape trust. How do you build trust? How do you know trust exists? What do your different generational expectations look like? We're going to look at different generations and career progress. And then what does culture really look like versus that performative culture? Because performative culture is so clear to people that you don't care, and then they leave. So let's talk about what this is really. This is psychological safety. People stay when they feel their knowledge, experience, and contributions matter, when they matter. When people feel like they matter, they are invested, share information to grow alongside them. The key here is that retention often feels transactional. How do you keep people? What can I give to you to stay? And it's a feeling, and it's the way that they engage. And that's not something that we often have metrics tied to. And so now you have to look at what the outcome is to tie metrics to it. And that's engagement versus disengagement. What does engagement look like? How do people contribute information? What information are they sharing? How are they being involved? What does involvement look like? Is it sick time? Is it turnover? Is it downtime? Is it errors? What are the prove that people are engaged in the process? Are they calling things out? Are they contributing to problem solving? Do they want to be a part of decision making? That shows that they're being recognized and valued. And if they're not doing these types of things, that's the disengagement. And those are the metrics you can track to know if psychological safety exists. You may have seen in the past some form of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Maslow's hierarchy of needs is your physical safety, your physiological safety, your love and belonging, all the way up to self-acknowledgement and self-enlightenment. When you have psychological safety, it similarly moves through that in the workplace, how you show people they matter. Right now, pay and benefits is the #1 recruitment strategy for organizations. We say, oh, it's great pay, you get all this. There was, during COVID, people started to get more remote benefits. They said, we'll give you a stipend for your internet. We'll give you new technology. Then we saw this big health craze where people got gym memberships. I saw companies doing HelloFresh comparison. They delivered food as a part of the employee benefits package. We started to see integration of yoga or of massages and things like that. They're great. I'll take massages as an employee benefit all day. But that's that base level, that this is what people should get. Then we need to move up into other components that set you aside from every other organization. That's respect and inclusion, which is starting to be integrated. But if you really want to excel and prove that your organization is better to draw people in, you need to go into knowledge recognition, showing them that what you want from them, you want them to contribute, and then that mattering. How do people feel like they are a part of your organization, that the organization would fall apart without them? Because that shows that they're invested, that what they're doing is important. So they show up, they contribute, they provide feedback. They're a part of the success, and not just, things aren't just happening to them. Without knowledge recognition, people are just existing. You have experiences without influence. So they may have knowledge that they're not being influential and sharing. And then they have ambition, but they're not being given guidance on how to use it. So it's really important, if you're moving into this knowledge recognition phase, that you're investing in integrating people. How do you build their responsibility, their autonomy, their ability to collaborate and share, their investment in the organization to be successful the same way that you want to be successful. The next few slides are quite deep. You can screenshot it now if you want. I'm going to send it to you, but if you want like that real time, I need to look at this after the session today, you're more than welcome to screenshot it. This is looking at the career stages and how we look at recruitment and retention, what people need. So I want to start over on the left column, which is your early career people. Then I'm going to move into mid-career, late career, and career transition. At the top, you'll see what people need during that period. So for people who are in early career, they need guidance and clarity. Do not confuse this with generational or age differences, because the next slide, I'm going to show you are like, while they do overlap some, you may have someone who's in a midlife transition to a new career. They still need early career support. even though they're in a different generation. Someone could be in mid-career at a very young age, even though they need different things for their generation. So this and the next slide do go hand in hand, but they're not direct translations of each other. So as someone in early career needing guidance and clarity, what motivates those people is clear learning pathways, regular feedback and coaching, and exposure to the decision-making and problem-solving process. They're more engaged when they have that clarity, because you want to consider that they're new to this space and they may be hesitant to contribute if they don't fully understand the process. We want people to explicitly ask them, explicitly engage them, and then that gives and builds that confidence. Leadership 101 is people develop skills and knowledge, and people need confidence and motivation. Those are the 4 components that build up strong leadership. If you hire someone, you're going to assume they probably have the skills and knowledge. You're going to be working to develop their confidence and motivation, which is done through that feedback and that exposure. What undermines loyalty of this demographic is vague expectations, limited access to mentors, and being told to figure it out, because there may not be time, especially with staff shortages, to support people as heavily in this early career stage. But also a misconception is that people who come in to a job, quote unquote, they should have the skills. I see this a lot in healthcare. People who are recent graduates coming into a job are expected to be able to do it, but you have to consider that they've been doing it on mannequins and now they're doing it in real life, or they've been doing it in academies and now they're doing it in real life. First responders, same experience. If you have them making those decisions in real time, not just being given the confidence to do so, but they need to be given that regular feedback and coaching to build the confidence and the motivation that what their skills and knowledge are right. Say, hey, this is what you're supposed to do. That was a great approach. That builds them up. People who are mid-career are looking for autonomy and influence. This is that middle kind of get the lull in a career process where autonomy and trust are so incredibly powerful because it builds them as leaders. It allows them to develop their skills. It allows them to have more opportunities. And you want to show them that they can support other people. The risk here is that this is often where micromanagement exists the most, because people are mid-career. We want to make sure they're still doing their job. They're not in a leadership position. They could be just doing the same job for 10, 15 years. Sometimes there's stagnation and they don't really know their advancement opportunities, going back to that skills matrix idea. And they may be overlooked for that development because they don't know what the development opportunities are, or they haven't been tapped for development opportunities. People who are in late career are looking for respect and purpose, respect for their expertise, really building in an opportunity for them to given opportunities for knowledge transfer. Knowledge transfer doesn't happen because that level of investment isn't there. What really risks this group being untapped is their exclusion from decisions, because there's a separation from late career people and leadership, or the management, senior leaders, whoever it may be. That disconnect undermines them because they're not seen as being experts in their field. The assumption about resistance to change, it's not necessarily resistance to change, it's that they're not involved in the change. When people are invested in change, they buy into change better. And they lose that professional identity because now they are just seen as they're almost gone. Piece there is people who are in career transitions. On top of wherever they may be in their space, they also need safety and support. Psychological safety to learn because they're going through that big change. Also, the knowledge that they may have transferable skills, and supporting them because their identity is now changing. Our identity ties to our jobs, whether we like it or not. And so supporting people during that shift allows them that development alongside every other career pathway. The next slide, you're going to see some carried over ideas. So considering that they are often paralleled, you're going to see some of the same existence. So looking at Gen Z, Millennials, Gen X, and Boomers, this is the first time in a long time that we've had 4 generations, and we're nearly about to have 5 generations in the same workplace. Because if you look at it, people who are 2012 to that next that's going to Gen Alpha, those people are coming into the workplace within the next year or so. Some people are already in the workplace because you're looking at them turning 14 this year. Some workplaces, they're getting involved. If you do summer jobs, and then you're going to start seeing them. And so we may, at some point, because you see boomers are 62, in the next year or so, you're going to have 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds, and 63, 64-year-olds across 5 generations in our workplace. And that's an incredible, because you each need different things. When we talk about the across the generations, from our youngest to our oldest generations, guidance and confidence, really critical. The younger generations need that psychological safety to ask questions, to be involved. They need to be able to get rapid feedback. You have to consider gamification of our world is what they need. We have gamification. If you think about social media, they're constantly swiping. They're constantly receiving validation, and they're constantly receiving approval or denial of what their experience is. Now imagine in the workplace when they're not getting that rapid feedback, how that fits into their psychological perception. Access to constant learning, mentoring, small bite-sized things. Looking into what undermines that loyalty is that ambiguity. They need structure. They need that fast-paced, real-time engagement. And when we're encouraging that, we need them to be supported in the process. Going into millennials, you're looking at building that growth and meaning. As a millennial, I agree with this, and anyone else that's a millennial in the call, being connected to meaningful work, given opportunities for advancement and that flexibility paired with trust, people saying, I can do it. There's a weird millennial perspective that I feel like we all think we're still 19, because we need that opportunity for trust in this space, really given that opportunity to succeed, the autonomy we need. Career stagnation affects people, undermines their loyalty at this rate, and also being managed by outdated assumptions about motivation, that millennials only want to do things for certain things or whatever, that we don't want to do this or we want to do something else. Gen X, we're looking at autonomy and recognition, and that's why I said it kind of aligns with that mid to late career. Autonomy and efficiency, we need that stability, that opportunity. And then undermining loyalty is that micromanagement, being overlooked, and carrying informal leadership roles without recognition. Last, into and about that respect for experience and that purpose in their work. The undermining of that is done through assumptions about resistance to change. I'll tell you, so many people say, oh, they just will never change. They're just older, whatever. Everyone can change. Everyone can change. And exclusion from that step forward. When you're thinking about your spaces, the challenge here is that as a leader, it's not about knowing each one of these things so that when you go up to someone, you're like, okay, they are a millennial in an early stage career, and this is how I have to respond. It's about understanding that there's differences, and that as people progress through their lives and through their career stages, the way we support them shifts so that we can support people with different skills development, with people's autonomy and their buy-in, so that they contribute. And that draws people in, but that also keeps people. Because if I am in a late career position, and I know there's people who are in younger or older Gen X people and boomers who are still in the workplace. I had a Bell Canada technician at my house on Monday, and he is 63 years old, and he's like, I might just look for a new job. I was shocked. My mom is 68 years old, and she's still working full-time at the hospital. And she's like, yeah, I think I might look for something new. They're still contributing to our spaces. And it's really incredible to make sure that we are supporting them in a way that's going to help us innovate and continue to grow. If you want to talk about what you do as a leader in these spaces, it's really about your behavior. You are a leader. There's really supervisors and managers and leadership behavior. everyone can have leadership behavior and contribute as a leader. And that's what keeps people in the workplace or supports them to leave. That happens for every single person. So when we talk about leadership behavior, it is your person that's doing the training, it's the HR people, it's performance reviews, it's your senior leadership. It is every single person that exists within your workplace can perform leadership behavior. We talk about this in a linear pathway. So leadership behavior leads to trust. Because if we're strong leaders and we're inclusive and we understand people and build their psychological safety, we're encouraging them to share more information. We're encouraging them to show us what we need to know, contribute in problem solving, decision making, and that allows us to engage effectively, which leads to knowledge sharing. People aren't gatekeeping knowledge because they want to. They're gatekeeping knowledge because they're experienced, because they don't feel safe to share. They don't feel the purpose of sharing. They don't feel like they're valued in sharing. And that reduces the continuity of our workplaces because we're not gaining from that cyclical development. We're just reinventing the wheel over and over again. And knowledge just causes us to iterate. We need to iterate instead of reinvent. So what does this look like for you? Strong leaders recruiting for continuity and not just that immediate skills gap. This is your short-term needs and your long-term continuity. So what we're doing right now is a lot of it is short-term needs. Filling vacancies because you have production or service demands, hiring for specific technical certifications, replacing someone who just resigned, bringing in expertise to address an immediate issue, and hiring based on someone's speed or availability versus a long-term fit. I get it. I understand why we do this because we're looking at who can do the work right now. But if you look at the long-term effect, you have to hire 10 people over a period of time versus hiring someone who can have that long-term continuity. Your reinvestment in recruitment over time is more costly. It's more damaging to the workplace. You are going to continue to reinvent the wheel instead of iterating. Looking at long-term continuity, you can hire someone who can learn from experienced staff, that knowledge transfer, carrying knowledge forward themselves. Select candidates who have mentoring potential, not just the technical competence. I understand there are certain jobs that require technical certifications. This is separate. Considering how roles support your succession and knowledge transfer, hiring with adaptability in mind, looking at how you can upskill and reskill in your workplace, and assessing the new hires and how they can contribute to your team. The question you need to ask is, who will help sustain organization time? That shift makes your recruitment sustainable and retention longer. So let's look at these skills matrices that I've been talking about for this whole time. A skills matrix is the idea to understand what your people have and where it fits into the organization. So I'm going to show you a couple of different examples, none of which are the exact example you need for your workplace because you can develop this based on your needs. You understand this job requires these skills. This job requires these skills. This job requires these skills. We're going to hire this person and they have this skill, this skill, this skill, this skill as well. You can move them, cross-train them, develop their skills, develop a career pathway for people. You can create informal career pathways to say, if you have this, oh, maybe 3 years from now, you'll develop the skills for this, or we can work on this so that you can move to here or whatever. That builds people and it shows that investment in them. It's also really, really strong succession planning for your workplace. This is another example of it, looking at these skills on the side versus your employees at the top, looking at expertise versus interest. Is you want to assess not just them, because we're all going to say we're great at everything. You also want to assess the job tasks. What do these really need to succeed? Another two examples, looking at a CNC department specifically at the top versus cross-training at the bottom. You're looking at how people have the skill and how people can contribute to other people. So this is also building an understanding of who can coach, who can mentor, who can share information. This allows you to move and maneuver people. It helps with who can cover if you have a smaller staff and you need to do coverage, or you need to build people's skills for coverage. I'll tell you, no organization prepares for someone not showing up the next day. If one will look, for example, I'll look at what the top example here. If John A, the very first person in that CNC matrix, if John A doesn't show up to work the next day, Terry's done. Terry's going to have to carry the load. How are we building succession planning? How are we building an opportunity for people to transition when it's necessary? It may not be because they are subtly kind of disappearing, they're quiet quitting and they're going to leave. Maybe the person passes away. Maybe they have a critical health incident, or they have to go take care of a parent, or especially as we see aging generations, maybe they are taking care of a parent or a child. What about your space do you understand can happen if someone leaves the next day? How does that work? Preparing for it allows you to pre-train and be proactive in that model, because when that happens, that's where your retention gets tested. Because if you look at that first one, if John's gone, Keith's after that, Mary's after that, you start to see that load's going to be packed onto other people until you hire a second Tom who's starting to develop skill and starting to become better. And then you have a huge skills gap, which adds to the workload of people who are extremely skilled. I'm going to pause for a second after that first section because we're talking significantly about recruitment and retention. Does anyone have any questions? You can throw them in the chat, or if you want to put your hand up. Does anyone have any questions specifically about recruitment and retention, the content that we've just gone through in terms of what I've said, or if you have an application question or anything like that? You throw it in the chat if you have a question, or you can, or the Q&A. Throw in the Q&A or the chat. I don't know. Either of them. I'm okay. I think the Q&A is anonymous. The chat is not. So you can do it that way. Or raise your hand if you have any questions. It's a lot of information. I get it. All right. I'm going to move into the second section. As I'm not seeing any hands popping up or any questions popping in the chat. If you're typing, we're more than welcome to keep typing and put it in the chat, and I will get to it. So in this second section, I want to talk to you about upskilling and reskilling. This is so incredibly important right now as we see a shift in our workplaces about keeping people, but also kind of transitioning to new technology and new ways of work. So in this section, talk about cross-generational upskilling and reskilling and how that supports your knowledge transfer, how it reduces your skill loss, and the strengthening of your organizational resilience. So in terms I'm going to use are upskilling, reskilling, which I'll define in the next couple slides, knowledge transfer and learning culture. I also want to talk about informal learning and skill sustainability, but also workforce adaptability. So right off the bat, I want to define upskilling and reskilling. These are huge buzzwords that are starting to kind of trickle out from manufacturing, and they're starting to go into other workforce spaces. And so if it hasn't entered your industry yet, it's coming. And if it hasn't entered your industry yet, that's fine, because the actual process of it is in your industry. You just may not have used these specific terms. So upskilling is enhancing an employee's existing skill so they can perform better and take on expanded responsibilities with the same role or career path. So someone, manufacturing line supervisor, advancing data analytics to better monitor their production efficiency. So this is on-the-job training for technology and things like that. They may stay in the same role, but you're getting them to a higher skill level to perform that role. So this is when we go to additional training, whether it's like your software training or your use of force training or whatever it may be. Those are tied to your management training, same thing, leadership development, change management training, situational leadership, emotional intelligence training. That's all upskilling. Reskilling is when you're training an employee in a new skill for a different role or career pathway that is because of an organizational change, a technology shift, or workforce planning. So this would be more tied to your skills matrix. So a customer service representative is trained in cybersecurity basics and transitions to entry-level IT security role. So it's moving into a different position or a different function. So they have to have a different level of skill. When you talk about cross-training to build a better backup if people leave, for succession planning, for career progression, whatever it may be, reskill within your organization. What we lack is reskilling a lot of the time, because we don't reskill for cross training. We don't reskill for succession planning. We often just upskill to keep people in that role, make them better at that role. But when you do cross training or you prepare for succession planning, it also builds your organization because it removes the silos of your departments. And now people understand what other people do and what skills are required. And you can innovate because of that, because now they see the different components and they can see where it's going in the process. Or if I'm receiving documentation from this person, now that I understand their role, I wish they did it this way so that it would work better for me. It allows us to see that process map of our organization from the lens of the people doing the work. When we
Hi,
look at
Janelle, sorry, it's Carrie. Is there any way we're still getting overall the quality of your Wi-Fi is decent? It's a little choppy at times. So is there any way, let's try, if you don't mind, as much as I love seeing your face, can you maybe try to shut the camera off and we'll see if it's any better. I'll let you know.
if it's not, I'll switch to audio from a non Wi-Fi device.
Okay, well, let's try this and I'll let you know, okay?
Thanks.
Thanks.
So when we're looking at upskilling and reskilling in the workplace, we need to talk about how they overlap. Upskilling is most effective when we're looking at knowledge flow across generation, because you want people to develop their skill from other people. But reskilling fails when it ignores that generational learning preference and the learning differences. So we're going to talk about learning disabilities, neurodiversity, and things like that in terms of pace, format, confidence, and prior experience that people have. They overlap. Your technical skill overlaps with institutional knowledge and adaptive thinking, and you want to be right in the middle of that, because you do need technical skill, but you also need people in the workplace to share their knowledge. And you also need that modern adaptive thinking to make sure it's most effective. This is what it looks like very cleanly. So your goal of reskilling is career transition or succession planning. The trigger for that is performance growth versus role redundancy or workforce shifts. And it's really, reskilling is preparation and being proactive. So it could be that nurse learning advanced patient documentation software, which is upskilling, versus a nurse retraining to be a health informatics analyst, which is reskilling. So this is that Maslow's hierarchy of needs I showed you earlier in the workforce format when I talked about payment and benefits all the way up to knowledge recognition and mattering. When we talk about psychological safety, it enables honest learning and knowledge sharing. Employees might not admit their skills gap, or they might not share their interests because they don't have trust. We want people to have trust in the workplace because it allows them to share authentically and honestly and ask for help and say when they want to move and transition. If I, as a third party person, am walking into an organization and I hear people have resignation letters written, that means there's no trust, because they don't have the ability to share what they need to stay. And so you want to make sure people have the ability need to stay. For leaders, that means that you need to take a role in translating that knowledge into practice. So if you're doing coaching, whether you're observing or you're sharing problem-solving strategies, it's not just doing a course or taking information and providing it. You need to be a part of that knowledge transfer. You need to tell people how to grow by doing things that help people grow. And you need to create a learning culture that protects organizations from turnover and disruption. So when we look at this, we go from that knowledge to that coaching to putting it into practice and building that confidence. I talked about situational leadership as being skills and knowledge assessed and confidence and motivation assessed. When we talk about confidence and motivation, that comes from coaching, showing people that what they're doing is effective. Yeah. Icon, I'm assuming you have a question. Maybe.
No, that was accidental.
Oh, welcome. Thanks. You were just giving me a high five. I'll high five back.
Yes, that works.
So when we're looking at upskilling and reskilling, we also need to have the culture to learn better. So we're going to do a test. Like I told you I didn't tell you there's a test, but surprise, there's a test. So what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to show you very quickly 10 images. You're not going to write down the images. You're not going to take notes. All you're going to do is try and memorize the images. And then afterwards, I'm going to ask you to type in the chat what the 10 images were, or as many as you can remember. Don't cheat. Don't start writing them as we see them. I want you to really just try and memorize them based on what you see. After, I'm going to show it to you very briefly, and then I'm going to tell you to type them in the chat, and then I'll show you them again, and we'll see how well you did. So are you ready? You have to. I'm going to ask you. All right, write as many as you can in the chat. Okay, we're getting it. We're seeing. Let's see. There we go. Okay, so I see. Oh, there's some people that got quite a bit. Look at these. Carly's like right up there. This makes me wonder. Look at some of these. Wow, that's incredible. Look at all these. That's great. So I'm going to show you. Oh, I see some people still putting them in. Perfect, perfect. So you had the airplane, the acorn, the clock, the crown, the feather, the apple, the anchor, the ambulance, the bee, and the dinosaur. So I saw quite a bit of people getting quite a number of them, and that's really awesome. And so I'm going to ask you, you can either put your hand up or you can type it in the chat. Tell me the method that you used to remember them. And this is what I'm most excited about. So you can share in the chat or you can throw your hand up and tell me repetition. So you're sitting over there going plane, acorn, clock, crown, feather, over and over again. 6 start with A. Yeah, a lot of them do start with A. Tried to chant it in my brain. I like that Carly's like out loud. If you're in the office or you're somewhere and you're just like apple, anchor, ambulance, bee, dinosaur, apple, anchor, ambulance, bee, dinosaur. I can just imagine that repeating it in my head. Yeah. So I like the visualization idea that you had the full image. You're just like kind of hoping that you see it again. So when we're talking about the way that we memorize, verbally out loud in our head, people noticing that they start with A, some people were grouping them together. And so you have those different ways of thinking. So, a typical function, we're going to do it again in a second, but our brains love to sort information. That's the way that we function. When you're upskilling and reskilling in the workplace and providing information, it's about clarity, repetition, and engagement. You're not going to like look at music notes to listen to music. You could, some people can, and you're not going to listen to instructions about geography to understand are laid out. I could say if you go to the right and then down and then north a little bit and 300 kilometers this way, there's 65 sheep. And then if you go west about 500 feet, there's going to be some cows. It's a lot harder than looking at it on a map. So when we talk about the way that we receive information and how it works for us, it can be done more effectively for different things. Now, I'm going to show you another set. I'm going to do it differently this time. And the same thing, I'm going to ask you afterwards, not writing it down or anything. I'm going to ask you to try and say all 10 or try to write all 10, and then we'll see how you did. Hammer, diamond, pepper, chicken. Apple, balloons. Now try and name as many as you can in the chat. All right, and as people are putting those in the chat, I want you to tell me, was it easier or harder for you? What did you use the same method this time? Did you use a different method this time? It was harder. Why do you think it was harder? It was harder with me saying the way that we perceive information. Sometimes people are receiving it with more information is helpful. Sometimes with less information is helpful, because in this one, you got the image, you got the text, and you had it verbally explained. And so it was a lot of overwhelming information at once. So I see, like, because the text was added, because I didn't do it like you do it. You're right. I wasn't saying it the way you were saying it, or you would have done it. I tuned out the images and listened to you saying it, and then I cut it. Oh, sorry. Technology is not on our side. So when we're looking at the way that we're engaging, we may engage certain ways, and other ways it's going to be more effective or less effective. Just thinking about the learning differences that we have in our spaces. Now, I see some friends on here from an organization that I've done the next task with before. So if you've done the next task, I would like you to reserve your answer because you know the answer. Yes, you just. Oh, the next task I want you to do is going to be looking at your neurodiversity a little more. So when we're talking about that upskilling and reskilling, we really need to make sure our learning is ongoing, but it's valuing that individual, and we make sure we do it in a way that's going to encourage them to contribute. Are we ready for the next task? How many F's, how many of the letter F are in this sentence? Finished files are the result of years of scientific study combined with the experience of many years. Type it in the chat. Any F's? All over the place. So we've got some 3s, some 5s, some 4s, some 6s. And I'll show you. There are 6. There are 6 F's, and the 2 F's you miss are the ofs. because our brain versus an F. So when we're talking about the way we perceive,
Janelle, do you mind repeating that? You just cut out. So we got the number of Fs, but can you say why we missed some of the other Fs?
yeah, I'm gonna join from my phone.
Try that.
So yeah, just give me 2 seconds. So the audio's better. I should also say that Ariane has to let me into the meeting.
Janelle, try to join the other one, this session, not the hold.
There I am. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that sounds good, Janelle.
Okay.
So thanks. We got the number of Fs that you mentioned, but then you cut out when you were explaining why we missed some Fs.
Yeah, so when we hear the V. So we're hearing the V instead of an F. So the way we interpret information is going to be different based on if we're seeing it versus if we're hearing it. And so when we talk about upskilling and reskilling, the biggest challenge we're starting to face is those learning differences in our spaces. The next one I encourage you to do in your own space. So you're going to be speaking out loud if you can, wherever you may be, and you're going to be reading the text out loud. You're going to tell me the color of each of the words, starting from the top, going across all the way down to the bottom. So as you are reading them, I want you to think about the color you were saying versus the word you were saying, or if you got mixed up, because sometimes our brain is trying to process multiple pieces of information at the same time. So you might have tried to say cyan instead of red or orange instead of blue. And as you move through it, maybe you said a different color than some people. And then so I see in the chat, some people were saying, I was reading the words, or was it it was the color instead of the words. So you're putting the color, you're thinking of the color. And so our brain processes it differently. If you remember in elementary school, if you grew up in at least in Canada, the United States, I remember doing it, where you kind of build the blocks around the word to see the tall letters and the short letters for the different capitals or B's or L's. So when I capitalize the E on orange, it does mess with your ability to read information. And so the same can be done in our workspaces when we're talking about giving people that opportunity to provide feedback. The reason I'm showing you these is because I want you to consider how you're building upskilling and reskilling in your space for inclusive recruitment and retention. You want to bring people in and keep them, and you have to do that from a diverse lens. Before we get into the third section, I want to ask if there are any questions tied to upskilling and reskilling that you have around what you could do for upskilling and reskilling, where to start, or anything like that for your spaces. You can throw your questions in the chat, or if you want to put your hand up and ask your question, I can answer those. Any questions around upskilling and reskilling before we go into section 3? I'm going to give myself 37 seconds to go fill my glass of water while you put those questions in the chat, and I really hope to come back to one, so I'll be 37 seconds. It's also our midpoint-ish, so if you want to grab a glass of water for 1 minute.
Oh, no questions while I was gone. This must mean that like we're just deep diving, investing in our development. I'm excited. Okay, so in our third section, we're talking specifically about collaboration. So this is a linear process in this conversation, but it's not linear in your workplace. So we talk about recruitment, we talk about upskilling and reskilling, and now I want to talk about collaboration. So it does seem linear in the career life cycle, but these have to happen simultaneously to be successful for your organization to be sustainable. So here we're going to talk about identifying strategies for effective collaboration, improved communication, and reciprocal knowledge sharing while minimizing the conflict and disengagement. So we're going to look at communication styles, team dynamics, knowledge continuity, trust, power dynamics, shared accountability, inclusive leadership, and conflict prevention, and how you can integrate these into your space. So first, collaboration is about structure. That is often missed when we talk about building people skills and building people spaces for people. We often think that it happens naturally, but we need to do it intentionally. You need to build a structure within your organization that encourages collaboration and allows people to do it as a part of their day to day. So when we have assumed collaboration versus structured collaboration, it shows up like this. So we'll talk about the two scenarios. In the first scenario, you might have a team told to work it out together. Like if you have a problem and you say, "Oh, just figure it out, work it out amongst yourselves," or you sort it out, that can create tension because your senior staff might dominate the decision based on their tenure. Newer employees might hesitate to contribute or share information. Tasks become duplicated or missed. And frustration is misinterpreted as generational conflict. So your fault points here are a lack of role definition. You have power defaults, and power defaults also exist on the identity level. And so we talk about social dynamics. It can be the power dynamics between men and women, racial dynamics, religious dynamics, whatever it might be. You might also have uneven knowledge sharing. When we talk about structured collaboration, it doesn't have to be you say this, then this person contributes, then this person contributes. It doesn't have to be so formal that it feels sterile. But when there's intentional roles assigned, it encourages people to share more authentically. Expertise is still respected, but there's no overpowering of others. It's shared floor space. Newer staff are invited to contribute more intentionally, and knowledge transfer becomes more explicit versus incidental, because now you're asking people to share information based on their understanding, their perspective, and contribute to the outcome. The impact is that these clear roles reduce your power imbalance because now people are given the opportunity to engage authentically without that hesitation to contribute. And it increases their psychological safety to contribute because they're shown they matter because of the intentional engagement that's integrated. Another scenario could be if the team is asked to improve a process. That's assumed collaboration. Can you make this process better? Can you streamline the process? Each generation we know has different understandings of what success is or what they need to do to be involved. We have experienced staff may focus on risk reduction, where newer staff might focus on speed and innovation. And then you start to have more conflict because you have differing points of view. And that conflict is framed as attitude or resistance. Younger people are seen as entitled or having attitude. Older generations are seen as being resistant, even though they have different perspectives on what needs to be prioritized. When you do this in a structured format, you have that defined shared goal and criteria. So everyone understands the why behind that decision-making process or working towards improving the process. There's different perspectives that are gained and that strengthens your outcome. And then the debate becomes productive. It's not personal. It's not about what you're not including, or you don't think this, or you're entitled, or you're resistant. And it starts to become, why do you think that way? Why do you think that's a better approach? And then the clarity doesn't undermine people's autonomy to contribute. They all have investment, and you're no longer micromanaging each other because it's a structured engagement and each person has their own piece of the part. When we do collaboration, it's really important to talk about the way that we provide communication to each other, because our communication style either blocks or enables knowledge transfer. Knowledge transfer happens because someone's willing to give information, but also people are willing to receive information. And that happens through the way that we share information. When we normalize ways of sharing information differently or expertise differently, it shows up better, it's received better. And that happens starting with leaders, modeling respect, modeling curiosity and humility. We have to be able to say, I don't know. I don't understand. I need help. I want to hear your perspective. How would you do this differently? Why are you doing it this way? When we show people that we respect their contribution, that we're interested in what they say, and that we're willing to learn from them, it encourages knowledge transfer in an authentic and sustainable way. Obviously, I'm hungry. We're talking about sandwiches here. So I want to talk to you about building a BLT and how communication styles can affect the way that we receive information. Here you have the ingredients of a juicy BLT. That bacon does look kind of raw though, so I'm not sure. When we talk about the way that we provide information, it could be, hey, build a BLT with these ingredients. Here's a visual step-by-step of how to build a BLT. You're encouraging the information to be provided, but is it in the most effective way? Here's another way of how to build a BLT. I can give you the ingredients visually. I can give you the ingredients written. I can give you the instructions visually, and I can give you the instructions written. It's also important to consider how you're providing written instructions or any instruction. You'll notice that I provide information there in all different ways. I wrote in the instructions one piece of bread versus when you look down at the 2 slices of bacon, I have the 2 and then the number 2 in brackets, the visuals alongside it and everything like that. The way we communicate either includes people or shuts people out, because they are either going to understand or they're going to feel discomfort and they're going to disengage. It does not hurt to add more information as long as people are given the accommodation to receive that information. So if I'm going to ask you to repeat the 10 items, I can give it to you in all 3 forms, but I could say, which way do you feel would be the best for you? Do you want to hear me say it 10 times? Do you want to read it, just the text? Or do you want to see the images? Or do you want to receive all 3? You can do it in a way that is sustainable for them to use the form of communication you provide. When we use collaboration cross-generationally, it strengthens our decision making. We need to make sure that we're incorporating the best way for those people. So if we're talking about combining their lived experience with new experience, it improves our risk assessment and our innovation. Hey, I've used that type of bread before. It doesn't toast very well. Or when I put it in the microwave to thaw, I put a damp piece of paper towel over it so it keeps the bread moist. Actually, a side note, I learned that you can freeze sourdough, but then before you reheat the sourdough in your oven, you soak it, like you run it under your tap with water, and then you put it in the oven and it reheats to like perfect moisture. That's my food tip of the day. But when you're doing these types of things, if you're not incorporating people in that process, then you're not going to gain their lived experience alongside their new perspectives. So for this example that I gave you, one person might say, hey, we should get the produce from this store. It's got better produce than everywhere else. Someone might be really good at making it, so they might have a really synthesized version of making it. And another person may never have made it before, but they want to learn how to make it, so they're going to just try it out. We have conflict in our collaborative spaces when we have misaligned values. That's not resistance. It's not having entitlement or attitude. It's about not fully understanding the demographic in the collaborative process, knowing that we have different generations, different career paths, and that we need to incorporate an understanding of that to make it most effective for our space. Looking back to that process that I was talking about, I'm going to show you both again, but in a different way. So we're talking about collaboration specific here. The early career needs that guidance and clarity. How they show up in collaboration is that fresh perspective. If you build psychological safety, they ask clarifying questions, they share new technical or digital skills, they seek guidance and validation, and they participate actively. If as a leader, you're creating that psychological safety for them, if you have that meaningful involvement, you remove those hidden barriers. This early career phase needs confidence and regular assessment, because that's that real-time gamification, the hyper interactive space that has been created for this demographic. Young people are very engaged in the world, engaged in their own life, and they're engaged in so much information that guidance and clarity can be seen as entitlement, but really it's just a new perspective at looking at our workplaces and our problems. Those mid-career demographics are still looking for that autonomy and influence. So looking at how they can translate information between departments. They're being that bridge. They're balancing the technical expertise with that practical constraint. They're challenging your assumptions. They're driving momentum, and they're protecting their functional priorities. So what you do as a leader for your mid-career people for collaboration is making sure that you're aligning incentives with what they're doing. You're empowering their ownership over tasks. So you remove that micromanagement and you build advanced collaboration skills for them. This is where you build your leaders who are not in management or supervisor positions. You're prioritizing that alignment with empowerment. So you want them to be involved and take on the tasks and ownership, even though they may not be in a position that formally takes on tasks and ownership. The third piece is your late career people. They need that respect and purpose. You're looking at the need for the institutional knowledge and historical context. That's what they're bringing. They are the foundation of knowledge transfer. They know what that historical transition for your organization looks like. They can mentor people. They've seen it. They've been there, done that. You have the ability to incorporate their anticipation of downstream risks because they see the full process. They see how things have developed. They can be a part of that strategic perspective, but they may unintentionally dominate discussions because they show up as those leaders. And so when we have people who are interested and invested on taking on new roles, or people who are curious, it may come across as questioning their knowledge, questioning their seniority, when really it's people who are coming in as curious or coming in needing that autonomy. As a leader, you can leverage their wisdom. You can encourage an adaptive mindset for them, helping them understand the needs of early and mid-career people, and balancing their voice with the space, understanding how they can contribute in a way that's effective. That's activating their wisdom while maintaining their adaptability in that workplace. Similarly, you're going to see some of the similarities across generations here as well when we talk about how they show up and what you do as a leader. Younger generations are your digital first people. They're really focused on psychological safety. They ask why. They need those high intensity feedback loops, and they bring that social awareness. And you do that by giving them a voice in the environment. You give them that clarity. You really leverage their need for inclusion, clarity, and speed because you're building a faster, more productive, iterative cycle. Millennials and Gen X, you're seeing that autonomy needed, that growth, that investment, where you're giving them the ability to engage and support the organization in that transition or any sort of movement. You want them to be those connectors, those relationship developers, those bridge builders. And you do that through that growth linked opportunity, giving them autonomy, making sure that they have feedback necessary to support culture, but also ensure that they're that stability. You develop them, but you also empower them and you recognize them in that position, because it's very much midlife crisis position style, where it's like you get into a stagnant role. They need to be valued and validated in that stagnation of their career. And you're boomers, you have that respect and purpose, like those late career people, where you're bringing that deep institutional knowledge in. And you do that by honoring their experience. You can use that upskilling support because you want them to be in the most modern skills level for their role, and also leveraging their relationships. Ultimately, you're building that respect. You want to show them that they matter, but also give them the skill to recognize that all people in their spaces matter. So what are we doing about this? And this is really, I think, the most critical piece of today. I've given you so much information about how we develop our spaces, but now I want to talk to you about what you do with this information. So the first thing I want to talk about is you, because you have to focus on the development of yourself before you talk about the development of your spaces. And the start of that is with your daily behavior. How do you model leadership behavior? How do you prioritize the leadership in your spaces? How do you prioritize giving people autonomy? How do you prioritize giving feedback? And how do you reinforce what determines your recruitment promises, your learning, your collaboration in real time? I've given you 5 questions here to think about. These 5 questions are going to be listed in your key takeaways as well. So you're going to get all of this. But I want to talk through them and why I'm asking you to think about them, because I think it's so important for you as an individual to incorporate this reflective piece as you go forward. So first, I want you to think, how do my leadership behaviors reinforce or undermine what we promised during recruitment? This analysis determines whether you're selling an authentic experience or not. When we talk about your leadership behaviors, it's looking at what your organization stands for, how your values come through in the messaging for your space. I have gone into a lot of organizations that struggle with culture, and the first thing I ask their team members is, what are your organization's values? And it's crickets, because people put values on their website, they put values in their handbook, they have a code of conduct, but they don't really know what those values look like and how they show up in the day to day. And that's what I want you to consider. What do you do to match what you promise to people coming in? Do you promise integrity? Do you promise respect? How do you show up doing that? And how do you know you're doing that? Because we can say, oh, yeah, I have integrity. Oh, yeah, I'm respectful. Oh, yeah, I'm inclusive. What are you doing to measure that you're performing this value? Or how do you measure if your values are at risk? The second question there is, where do I unintentionally privilege certain voices, styles, or experience levels? To do this, you need to understand your dynamics. Who do you engage with? Why do you engage with them? Who's your go-to? Who do you tap for advice? Who do you seek out feedback from? If something happens, what's the order of communication? How do you go to different people? This allows us to understand where we might value certain people more than others. When we talk about bias, we often like to affirm our own biases. We'll go to people who think like us to validate us. It's like when you call your best friend or your family member that you know is going to say, "Oh yeah, you were right. Oh, they're so problematic. Oh yeah, they're toxic." You often lean on people who are going to validate you. And so that might unintentionally privilege certain people, which really bars our ability to think forward and innovate and do better. I also want you to think about how you personally support knowledge transfer across your generations and what you can do in that knowledge transfer process. So if you're encouraging knowledge transfer, whether it's mentorship, sponsorship, or co-training, cross-training, whatever it may be, how do you do that? Where do you share your knowledge? Where do you share your leadership skills? How do you build other people up? When was the last time you modeled learning, unlearning, or asking for help? Some things with the work of equity, diversity, and inclusion require unlearning. It requires us to rethink how we think. How are you doing that in your workplace where you're asking other people to share information, to contribute and provide information that can be helpful? How do you show them that you're learning? What are you going to do from today and go back to your team members and say, this is what I learned, or this is my aha moment, or this changed my mind, or this provided a new perspective for me? What does that mean to you, and to asking for help in those spaces? And the last question there is, how do you create psychological safety in everyday actions? Psychological safety at the root of it is making sure people feel seen, heard, and valued. And to be seen, heard, and valued, you need to understand what diversity is, what they need, what people need based on their diversity, and how you're showing up and responding to that diversity in everything you do. Whether it's your learning, the way you provide learning for people, recognizing that they have learning differences, the communication style that you integrate, or how you provide information to people or receive information from them, getting that feedback. Starting here is the most critical piece, because if you don't understand what you do, then it's hard to analyze your organization to be better. So setting your action, and this is something that I'm going to ask you to in real time contribute. So this might feel a little uncomfortable, but I'm encouraging you to step outside your comfort zone just a little bit. And in the chat, I'm going to ask you to choose one of these three things. You don't have to put all three. You can put all three if you'd like. I want you to tell me one behavior that you're going to start doing, or one behavior you're going to stop doing, or one behavior that you're looking to strengthen. From today's conversation, we talked about recruitment, we talked about onboarding and what that life cycle of employees looks like, building trust through our behaviors, the learning process, building retention, upskilling, reskilling, knowledge transfer. We talked about looking at people across generations and across career trajectories. And then we talked about what to do if people exit, how to incorporate their feedback into the recruitment and retention process, and how we receive information from them. So it doesn't have to be all three, but I'd like to hear one of them. What is one behavior or one action that you're going to do from today that is going to be something you're going to start, something you're going to stop, and something you're going to strengthen? And you don't have to put the full sentence. You can just say, I'll start this, or I'll stop this, or I'll strengthen this. And you can share that in the chat right now. And I'd like to see what some of those things are. So I'm seeing, I will start trusting people with tasks. I think I can do. Julie, first of all, knowing you, I'm the same way. And I think as small businesses and as business owners and for everyone else here that's a small business or a business owner, it's incredibly challenging to trust people with tasks that especially in businesses that we started, because we're asking people to take care of our babies. And it is extremely difficult, but it does, when you give people autonomy and you give people that ownership, it creates so much power. Beth, you're starting to share your knowledge with others. Yes, gatekeeping is 2025. We're in 2026. We are knowledge sharing. Start taking a different approach to dealing with people who are resistant to change. Yes. And I want to say, Alex, with that, if you look at generational differences, the boomer generation had career loyalty, and they had loyalty to the government, and their messaging was from hierarchical positions. And so they generationally were brought up in a space where that was what was valued and how they create understanding. And so knowledge and respect based on tenure to them is very much like rooted in how they were brought up. And that's where that quote unquote idea of resistance to change came from. But really, it's just the same as like looking at young people needing to be involved in that hyper engagement and feedback. We just see the world differently. And so it's about having conversations about why what the perceived resistance develops from. Shauna, strengthening alignment with recruitment priorities throughout tenure in the organization. Catherine's looking at strengthening management ideas and recognition to trust them to deliver and train and ownership. And Paul's looking to start to communicate information needed for group engagement. So we're looking at a lot of starts and strengthenings, and I love that. I'm not surprised that there's not a lot of stops in there, because the stop is indicating that something that you're doing is potentially risky or harmful. But I want you to consider that even starting something means you're stopping something. Strengthening something means you're stopping something, because when we do things intentionally, we're also changing things that we weren't doing. We are, even when we're unintentionally doing something, we're intentionally doing something. And that's a really powerful switch. So now I want to talk about workplace integration. Thank you for sharing those. I'm really excited to see that you're making changes in your spaces. So I want to talk about what we're doing in our workplaces. So when we talk about workplace integration, it's about building sustainability by aligning your leadership behavior with your workforce system and your knowledge continuity. That looks like intentional design in all parts of your workplace. So you're looking at a critical shift in your structure, not just a checkbox, we're going to be better. This goes in your recruitment, learning, collaboration, knowledge transfer, and your leadership accountability in different ways. So if you're talking about recruitment, we're looking at, are we hiring for continuity, not just immediate skills gap? If you're talking about your learning, you're asking, do our upskilling and reskilling approaches support cross-generational knowledge flow? Looking at that skills matrix we talked about. For collaboration, it's, are your roles and goals and decision-making structures clear and inclusive? For knowledge transfer, where are we most vulnerable to knowledge loss? Anyone can leave at any time. So you really have to build in that understanding that you need to have knowledge captured. And leadership accountability, how are leaders expected and supported to reinforce these practices? Jumping back to knowledge transfer, I want to say that it's important to make sure that you're capturing knowledge in a way that doesn't make people feel like you're getting rid of them. A lot of times people are hesitant to provide information and they gatekeep knowledge because that's job security for them. And when they lose that job security, that first, it's an indicator of culture, it's an indicator of their psychological safety. But a lot of people tie lack of knowledge transfer to job security because they feel like that's what's keeping them in a job, especially older generations or people who may not have the same technical skills as other people. Having that specialized knowledge is what keeps them feeling secure. So you have to build psychological safety alongside building pathways for knowledge transfer. When you're looking to inquire for effective and sustainable action moving forward, you have to look at this process. So leadership comes before your recruitment, then you do your onboarding, which then you maintain that current position. So once people are there, you do learning, you make sure there's collaboration, you make sure that that knowledge continuity exists. And then when people exit, because people do exit, you utilize the information from that exit to rebuild your recruitment, onboarding, and employee experience. You can ask things like, where do policies and practices currently misalign? How do people understand policies? Are they tangible? Do they have frontline language? If you're seeing policies fail or falter, it's likely because they don't have that connectivity to the real experience. Which teams or roles require intentional knowledge transfer or planning? And how do we measure continuity, not just as performance? So really building in those metrics and tangible pieces to understand how what we're doing works. Going from today, I'm going to throw my camera back on. Look at, you're going to see my face once again. Maybe. There we go. Going from today, there's a number of resources you're going to get, and I want to talk to you about them. So you're going to get application checklists. These application checklists look at the building diversity in your spaces, building sustainability in your spaces, upskilling and reskilling. It's a diary that allows you to go step by step. It is an all-inclusive. If you were to not hire a consultant, this is a consultant on paper. Same thing with the expanded learning and videos. There's 3 hours worth of expanded learning. It's not a significant crossover to what you've learned today. It's quite different. and there's readings in there and other resources. You're going to get an email with your certificate from this session that's going to have a link to this, and it's going to allow you to access this information to really build your action in your workplace. Alongside this, you're also going to get an invitation to a coffee chat. I have some dates scheduled in my calendar over the next couple of weeks where if you're learning to do this in your or working to do this in your organization, there's a risk-free coffee chat opportunity to chat with me for half an hour and really look at what you need to do next, so that you can access that support. As well, in there, there's resources from SLEP that are going to encourage you to continue to engage with the resources they have as you're building your talent pool, engaging with the talent that we have in the region so that you can grow and expand alongside them. I'm going to throw me and Carrie's contact information back up. You can learn more about the program there if you haven't already been on the site. Maybe you just got the email and you can access those digital resources. You're going to get the key takeaways from today. You'll get the slide deck. And so you're going to be able to go back into all of this. We do have some time. If anyone has any questions, I welcome questions, your own workplace challenges or specific scenarios that you want to talk about. You can throw your hand up or you can ask a question in the chat. But I do want to say I appreciate you taking the time to learn with us today. And I saw Carrie pop back on, so I'm sure she's going to have something to say. But then if people have questions, they can throw their hand up or ask a question in the chat.
Great, thanks, Janelle. I'll just wait for a few minutes if anyone has any last minute questions or thoughts, comments. We've got Janelle here.
People are scared to air out their workplace laundry.
Or they may take you up on your coffee chat.
Maybe.
Oh, here we've got Julie's asking a question.
What if we have employees that are comfortable with where they are and don't want to upskill? This doesn't affect our day-to-day operations, but it's essentially fine, and we schedule around it. Do we ask our staff if they want to learn more, or do we require everyone to upskill? I find that people don't want to upskill because they don't have the perceived investment in upskilling. So when people don't want to upskill, it's likely because they don't see how it could make their job better or their current role better, or because they don't see any pathway forward with it. So I find this a lot in manufacturing. I know that what you do is not manufacturing, but I want to say, like, for your space, if we're talking about the client experience, or you do a lot of community involvement, you do a lot of social work through your organization. And so I think even with that, you want to build a better experience for people. And some of that comes through upskilling, but tying it back to what your employees value allows them to see that purpose in development. If they don't have that purpose in development, then they don't buy in. You can't force people to upskill, but if they see that trajectory of what it gives them, then sometimes they're more invested in it, unless it's a workplace requirement.
Great, thanks, Janelle. And I think Catherine may have one other question. So how do you approach management and owners about change and that it starts from the top?
Yeah, well, change does start from the top, but it doesn't. I think that when we say change starts from the top, I like to talk about accountability. It starts from the top. People start to move away from an organization, or they feel like they can't be involved with an organization when they feel like what they do won't go anywhere. So it doesn't necessarily mean that the top has to start making all these changes. It means that managers and owners have to show willingness to hear problems. They also have to show willingness to take action on problems and then hold themselves and other people accountable to the standards. When you do that, change can happen from the bottom. Your change, most likely, a lot of decision making and problem solving shifts happen from people who are in frontline roles. They see the problem engaging with clients, developing products on the line, in whatever it may be. That's where they see the need for innovation. but there's no pathway for that to actually be done, or they're not being held accountable to that. So policies don't have any sort of repercussive action if people don't follow a certain policy. So then people kind of get away with it. That leads to subjective management. It leads to micromanagement of each other. And so when you have leaders who hold the people accountable, they open that line for feedback, change actually happens from the bottom.
Great, thank you. Thanks for the question. Well, I think we got everyone's questions addressed, so thanks, Janelle, for that. Couple of last minute thoughts that I had, Janelle, so I was kind of writing some notes. You told us not to write, but I did. A couple of things that stood out for me in particular was the importance that leadership has on ensuring that employees feel like they matter. So to me, that was like such a basic principle, but such an important piece of it that I made note of. And wow, 5 generations that I've often heard about the 4 and not really thinking about that we have the 5th coming in very closely thereafter. So that's an interesting thing to think about. And then lastly, the piece that you talked about fostering collaboration is, I made note, sometimes we take it for granted that it just happens. And I love the fact that you reminded us, like, do it intentionally with a plan, with a structure. And so that was one thing. Those are kind of the 3 pieces that I took out of all the mentionings today. So thank you. So with all that, Janelle, you wrapped up in record time. This is amazing. I want to thank everyone for joining our call today. Ariane shared some other resources and more workforce programs that we have to offer through SLEP. And so we encourage you to check those out as well. But again, thank you for taking nearly 2 hours of your time this morning to engage with us on this discussion. Janelle, thank you again. You never cease to amaze me. We've worked together now for a number of years on different items, but you always have new content and new things that I'm taking away. So I appreciate your time and your energy, and thanks for the contribution today. So I think that is a wrap. If anyone has any additional questions thereafter, feel free to reach out to ourselves and or Janelle, and we would love to chat further. Have a great rest of your day. Bye, everyone.